This is the TSG Multimedia podcast for June of 2019. We're sponsored in part this month by Podomatic and the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. I'm your host, John, and I'm back again with a special podcast for you. Last month, rail fans and historians celebrated the anniversary of the Transcontinental Railroad with all kinds of cool events. As you know, I went to Utah with my friend Gary to experience some of the events taking place there, and I ran a poll on the community tab of YouTube asking the audience if they intended to go to Utah for the celebrations, and a pretty large majority said they could not go. So in this special podcast, I'm going to share some of the highlights of my trip. This will allow those of you who couldn't make it to enjoy some of the sights and sounds, and it will also give you an idea about some of the upcoming programs on the channel. I want you to stay tuned until the end for this month's upcoming events and programs as well. So before I get to that though, I want to make a quick mention of TSG on Patreon. We welcomed several new crew members to the TSG Train Crew this past month, and just so you know, patrons get an early and sometimes exclusive access to some content. For example, when I returned from Utah, I posted an update from that trip. You're invited to go take a look at the page at patreon.com/TSG Multimedia. We'd love to have you aboard as well. It's a great way to help ensure that I can continue making content that promotes the hobbies of rail fanning and model railroading, and also content that preserves history. It's as inexpensive as $2 a month, and every little bit helps to keep things going. So if you love the content, but you can't part with $2 a month, then tell your friends about the channel and share it on social media. Every new subscriber and every view helps make the channel more visible on YouTube, and we can't have enough viewers for that reason. So let's talk about the Utah trip. On Tuesday, May 7th, I woke up early and drove to Sacramento, where I joined up with Gary. We got on the highway and headed east. We got to Salt Lake City by about 7, checked into our hotel, and then met our friend Alvin Gilbert for pizza and a brief tour in the dark of the immediate area. We even caught a stack train entering North Yard in the dark before calling it a day. On Wednesday morning, we picked up Alvin and drove to Bountiful, where our friend Warren Johnson was waiting to take us to one of his favorite spots in Weber Canyon so we could catch the Union Pacific's 4014 and 844 double-headed steam train on the way to Ogden. Warren took us to Stoddard Road Overpass just west of Morgan. We got to record a couple freight trains before the big steamers showed up. Moments before the steam train came, the overpass was inundated with dozens of people. I had 4 cameras set up. 3 of those were set to manual controls, which is something that I always do when I'm out and about. I use manual controls for better results. It was overcast, so I had 2 of my cameras on what would otherwise be the dark side of the train. That's something I never do, but in this case the light was diffused enough that it didn't matter, and I liked the composition from that side of the track a little better. And then, this is the really bad part, seconds before the train entered the picture, the sun broke out from behind a cloud and ruined the exposure on 3 of the 4 cameras that I was running that day. Luckily though, Gary got this amazing shot with his iPhone, and this is even handheld. After the crowd dissipated, Warren took us to his friend Ray Carter's house to see his HO scale layout. It's a nice layout in a basement, and one I'd like to go back and make a video about someday. We headed out to the canyon to scout some possible shots for the next Sunday, when the train would start making its way back to where it came from. We ended our scouting trip in Evanston, Wyoming, and ate some lunch. We went back to Warren's house and recorded for a layout tour video there. Gary, Alvin, and I went to dinner and then to Alvin's place and crashed. Alvin was nice enough to put us up at his place for most of the trip. Huge thanks go out to Alvin and his excellent wife Stephanie for putting up with us. Also to Lily and Phoebe. On Thursday, we got up and went to Gary Peterson's Salt Lake Southern HO scale layout. I'd been talking with Marty Peterson, Gary's son, about featuring the layout on a layout tour program in the months leading up to the trip, and it was worth it. This is another layout that'll be showing up on the channel very soon. That one's scheduled for July. When we were done with the layout tour, we drove to Provo to the Train Life brick and mortar shop. I wanted to show Gary the Daneberg sub layout that was built by Pelle Soeborg. While we were there, we chatted with Chris and Dan, and of course we ended up buying some model train stuff, which is what you always do at a train shop. We went to Ogden after that to meet up with CJ Vargas, who had invited us to dinner with a group of people that he was visiting the area with. And then after dinner, we walked over to Ogden Union Station, a couple blocks away, to see the 4014 and 844 on display. That was particularly cool. Both engines were staged with a fence around them, so you had to stay back. And then there was dramatic lighting. And while wandering around the area taking photos, Alvin comes over to me and says, "Hey, did you see who's over there?" or something like that. And I looked over and it was Ed Dickens, the guy who's probably most responsible for the 4014's revival. He was standing around talking to CJ's group about the project, and it was really cold, but we stuck around long enough to listen to some of what he had to say. And to say I was impressed by Mr. Dickens is an understatement. He was really gracious and humble. I mean, at a level rarely seen these days. It was really impressive. The next day was May 10th. There was a big celebration going on at the Golden Spike Historic Site at Promontory Summit. We originally didn't have plans to attend this because we didn't have a parking pass, and the passes had to be ordered ahead of time, and I don't think any of us knew about that. Luckily, I was able to get a pass a couple weeks before the trip from a friend who wasn't able to go, and she contacted me to offer it because she knew I was going to be in the area that week. Thanks very much, Mary. I think I can speak for all of us when I say we really appreciated the chance to go witness such a historic event. I was a little apprehensive about going at first because I generally dislike crowds quite a bit, and I knew it was going to be crowded, but it was also a chance to, be there and experience a once-in-a-lifetime event. The line of cars getting into the place stretched out for miles, bumper to bumper, crawling at a snail's pace. And once we got there, we were met with what felt to me more like a concert experience than a historic observance. There was a stage with cheery music and kids putting on a performance about the Transcon. It seemed like there were a few thousand people there, set up around the area where the reenactments take place on the regular days. And there were people wandering around in period clothing, and some really great speeches were made on the stage by the dignitaries there. And you can see some of these speeches on Gary's channel. He had his camera set up and recorded a few hours worth of footage there, mostly of the speeches. The best speech I heard was by author and historian John Meacham. He really stole the show with his message and his delivery. After the speeches, we headed out, thoroughly spent from sun exposure and standing most of the time. Then the next day, we met up with Marty and Warren at the Stadler manufacturing plant. Stadler is the company contracted to make the new Caltrain EMUs that are going to be used when the electrification project on Caltrain's line is completed. They had a partially built Caltrain EMU on display, as well as a completed DMU that was made for a transit agency in Texas. We got to see the inside of both units, and although photography was limited to protect their proprietary processes, we were able to talk to people who work there, and I even got to meet with the plant's general manager to inquire about a future visit to get some behind-the-scenes video for an update to the first ever train DVD I produced. It was Caltrain back in 2005, and the update I have in mind will probably come out in 2025, and it'll show the transition from diesel to electric. So being able to record some scenes at Stadler would be an excellent addition to a program like that. The Golden Spike Model Railroad Club of Utah was having an open house that day, so Gary and Alvin and I went there to check it out. We saw our friends Josh Walton, Josh McMurrin, Stan White, and Earl Hibbard there. All those guys were in Chasing Trains episodes that were recorded last year. And it was cool to see some of the updates to the layout that they've done there, and I got to meet some new friends as well. So that was pretty cool. After that, we drove out to the Y, that's south of the main yard in Salt Lake City, and we caught some nice front runner and Union Pacific action, including this UP train with the Norfolk Southern Dash 9 leading. That was something I really didn't expect to see. On Sunday, it was up early and straight to a donut shop. right before heading out to meet Warren at one of his secret spots in Weber Canyon to catch the doubleheader on its way to Evanston. I was surprised when Warren said that he had something for me. It was a pair of official Union Pacific work gloves. Thanks, Warren. I'm going to figure out some way to frame them so that I can hang them in the studio here. Anyway, while we were waiting for the train, Alvin showed us one of his amazing skills, riding his unicycle. I think he's learning how to juggle too. Before long, there were dozens of people in the area, but we staked out a really good spot and got what we were there for. It was never our intention to try and get ahead of the doubleheader because we knew the traffic on the highway would not allow it. So we hung around for a while, hoping for another train to come through. And Warren had plans with his wife for Mother's Day, so we bid them farewell and eventually found another freight train to chase eastward since our final destination was in that direction. It was Evanston. On the way east, we stopped to catch some trains in a few well-known locations on the Evanston sub. We ran into people from Pennsylvania and even some from Switzerland who came to see the big steam on the main line. We arrived in Evanston that afternoon and got to see the 4014 and 844 close up. Ed Dickens, once again, was there, talking to the people who were there to see the massive steam engines. And it wasn't as crowded that day as it was on the Thursday evening in Ogden, so I took a moment to introduce myself and shake his hand. And when I thanked him for his dedication to the project and all the hard work that it came with, not surprisingly, he quickly shifted the credit to his fireman Austin, who was also standing nearby. I introduced them to Alvin so we could get a picture with them together. And seeing these two machines close up like this is very impressive. If you ever have a chance to do so, take it, because there's no telling how long this kind of experience will continue to be available. We took a ride on the turntable in the roundhouse area, which is currently undergoing some renovation and preservation work. It's my understanding that this will eventually become a museum. Late that afternoon, we scouted around town to figure out what we'd want to shoot in the morning on the train's departure, and we ended our day at a Chinese garden park, part of the Uintah County Museum, right next to the tracks. And we talked to a local kid who had some very interesting stories about some of the goings-on around town. We'll probably never forget that. On Monday, we woke up early and went straight to our planned spot, a road that parallels the main yard, and it's on the northeast side, so the sun was good, straight across from the depot. And just like every other spot we staked out on this trip, as the time drew near for the departure, so did a crowd of people, and there were drones buzzing around. We caught a westbound freight as it passed through the yard, and then the steam train was delayed for a few minutes as an eastbound freight train came after that. Finally, the doubleheader drew up to the track and waited for the high green on the signal tower. This was a stroke of luck as it stopped right in front of my position, allowing me to get all kinds of really great still and slow motion shots, and it eventually got the green signal and departed. This was the last time we saw the doubleheader on our trip. We headed to North Yard in Salt Lake City and caught a couple front-runner commutes and then met Stephanie for lunch, dropped off Alvin in his place, picked up the gear I had left there, and started our journey back home. The first leg of our trip ended in Elko, and that's where Gary and I drove around town a bit and came across this old Western Pacific Jeep on a static display in a park. The next day, we drove the rest of the way back to Sacramento, and then I drove home from there. This was an epic trip, to say the least, both exciting and tiring at the same time. I recorded an overwhelming amount of video that I'm going to make into several programs on the channel, 2 layout tours which are already done and scheduled, 2 episodes of Chasing Trains at least, and then there's a highlight compilation of trains on the Evanston sub and some other ideas I haven't fully fleshed out yet. I have to thank everyone who made the trip possible. First and foremost, my friend Gary. Without him, I probably wouldn't have even gone, because I don't like to go places like that by myself. Alvin and Stephanie for putting us up at their place for a few days. Warren for sharing his top secret spots and the tour of his layout as well. Marty and Gary Peterson for the layout tour of the Salt Lake Southern. And CJ for the invitation to Ogden. Mary for the parking pass that allowed us to go to Promontory Summit. And of course, all the members of the TSG train crew who helped with their continued support. It was a memorable trip and a really great one as well. So Now back to the regularly scheduled business of the podcast, which is keeping you up to date on events and programs. My friend Dave is coming to visit all the way from Canada this month. You know Dave is Sparky107 on YouTube? I interviewed him on a podcast recently. I have plans to show him some cool railroad stuff while he's in town, and we'll probably pop on for some kind of live webcast while he's here. So that's something you don't want to miss. If you don't want to miss it, ring the bell if you haven't already done so to get notified when it happens. We're also going to do a special regularly scheduled live show on his channel. That's planned on June 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's 4 Pacific. And his channel is called Sparky107. Chances are we'll come on either just prior to that or just after the live webcast on his channel, and we'll do one on my channel at that point. So once I know for sure what the plan is, I'll post an announcement to the Facebook page and to the community tab right here on YouTube. There are quite a few TSG branded designs up on TeeSpring so that you can represent when you go out this summer. If you're watching on a computer, you can find links to the TeeSpring shop just below the video screen. If you have an idea for an item or a branded design that you'd like to see offered on the TSG swag store, put a comment below and let me know what you're looking for. This is one of my favorites right here, the Photo Line Etiquette t-shirt. It has the TSG logo on the front and on the back as well, and it has these nice friendly reminders. It's hard to believe June's already here. I have plans to go back to Salt Lake City once again for the NMRA National Convention in July. I can't even think about making more plans, but here are some of the events going on in June that you should be aware of. There are 2 photography exhibits about the Transcontinental Railroad that run through September 28th at the California Historical Society in San Francisco. Check out californiahistoricalsociety.org for more information. On June 1st, so today, Railtown 1897 State Park is reintroducing the number 28 with a special event. I don't have all the details at the moment, but I'm sure it's worth attending. The number 28 is a 280 that was recently returned to service and will probably see limited use over the next few years, so it's worth seeing it firsthand. Next Saturday, June 8th, Silicon Valley Lines is having an open house event between 12 and 4. You can get more information at siliconvalleylines.com. Also next weekend, the Niles Canyon Railway is running steam trains in conjunction with the Steampunk Festival in Niles. You can get more information at ncry.org. The Bay Area Prototype Modelers Meet is taking place on June 15th in Richmond. This event is highly recommended if you're into model railroading. Check out bayareaprototypemodelers.org for more information. And on June 22nd and 23rd, the Tri-City Society of Model Engineers has their 9th annual open house at Depot Park in the Niles District of Fremont. Check out nilesdepot.org for more information on that. As always, I encourage you to seek out events in your area. The heritage railroading and model railroading communities benefit from your support when they put on special events like this. So get out there and do something fun. And now for some upcoming program notes. Next Saturday, June 8th, take a tour of the Union Pacific Bountiful Division, Warren Johnson's HO Scale Layout Tour. It's a nice layout, and Warren has some good advice to share. On the 15th, we have Big Boy 4014 on the Evanston Sub. This program features a lot of my best shots from the line between Ogden and Evanston, of course, including some of the shots of the Big Steam doubleheader I mentioned earlier. On the 22nd, it's Model Railroading with Jack Burgess. This is a continuation of Jack's tour around his layout to show you some of his amazing scratch-built structures. In this episode, he tells the story about a bridge that took him months to build, only to be destroyed in mere seconds. Then on the 29th, yes, we have 5 Saturdays this month, it's a program about the Sierra Seminar. I attended this event last year and then again this year, but this year's purpose was to make a program about it so that you can see what it is and whether or not you want to go. I think you'll enjoy that a lot. All right then, that's all I have for you this time. Please consider becoming a member of the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. Every new supporter helps me bring more of the high quality content that you enjoy to the channel, and it's as cheap as 7 cents a day. It's really not much, but if enough people do it, it'll add up to enough to keep things going. You're the best viewers on YouTube, and I thank you all for your continued support. I'll see you next time. Which marked the completion of the transcontinental of the transcontinental. That was particularly coolly. Leave it running. Leave it running. That was particularly cool. Both engines were staged with That was particularly cool. Both engines were staged That was